Hello, my name's Ben Wheeler, and this is the Sunday Superversive Livestream. Today I'm with Bradford C. Walker. Bradford C. Walker is an independent author, blogger, and historian who decided to go from just supporting the superversive and pulp revolution movements with his blogging, to actively participating in them with his debut novel, Reavers of the Void. And that's part of the Knight Saga, right?
Yeah, that's part of the Knight Saga. It's book 1.
Excellent. And so the reason why I have him on here is to talk about his experiences Indiegogoing, I guess, and crowdfunding. There we go. That's better. As well as his book and his vision for the future. How has it been going, Bradford?
Well, we just crossed $1,000 with the Indiegogo campaign yesterday, which means we met our initial funding goal. And the first book is guaranteed to come out by December of this year, no later than New Year's Eve. Now we're into the stretch goal phase, and the stretch goals are going to be pretty straightforward. For every $1,000 after the first, up to $9,000, that puts another book on onto the speed production list. And once we pass $9,000, then we start talking about additional stretch goals. But I don't want to put the cart before the horse, so that's where we're gonna that's all the more I'm going to talk about stretch goals at the moment. My experience with Indiegogo has been far better than my first attempt over at Freestarter. At Freestarter, everything was going fine, but Freestarter got deplatformed by its payment processor.
I remember that.
Yeah, that had nothing to do with me, since I am still, I've gone from absolute nobody to persons a few people have heard of.
Right.
No, this was an attack on the owner of Freestarter by the processor, and unfortunately, Freestarter has not found anybody else who'd be willing to work with them, so the site is effectively defunct. Which is unfortunate. That gets into an issue I don't want to get into here. So
it's one of those things where I let this sort of stuff go, but we do need to talk about Knight Saga. So, I'm coming off the high that is Galaxy's Edge. Will this fill my void that happened when Star Wars divorced me and took half my stuff?
I'm honestly thinking that the people who are disaffected with Star Wars, but may not necessarily like the direction Nick and Jason did with Galaxy's Edge, might find Star Knight more to their liking. Nick and Jason went very much with the Space Marine aspect of things. They were, they wanted to focus on, ground pounding combat. They wanted to focus on a more, a point of view that would be, in Star Wars terms, far more the view of the stormtroopers, the clone troopers, and so forth, than their commanding officers. Whereas I'm going the other direction. I'm focusing far more on the romantic roots of that Star Wars made very good use of. So I'm focusing around the knights and not the grunts, so to speak.
I love it. And so what makes up a knight in this world?
Well, this is a feudal future. The far future of the 4th millennium is a world that is very reminiscent of historical Christendom. That is to say, the time of the High Middle Ages in Europe, where there was, in fact, your elite military class was, in fact, the class of knights. And while my protagonist is a knight of the Solar Guard, there are knights of various other domains all over the galaxy. What makes my protagonist stand out is that not only is he a knight of one particular group, but he's part of their elite warrior corps, the folks that stand at the center of the organization. So he gets dispatched to do a lot of troubleshooting. and that leads to a lot of his adventures. It's the case. It is in fact the case for Reavers of the Void. He's asked to intervene into a matter going on in a frontier domain, and that's where he gets wrapped up into this adventure.
Hmm. And so, what sort of themes are you looking for? I'm sure heroism is one, adventure is another.
Heroism, adventure, and the big one I think that's going to be somewhat striking is that people who read Arthurian romance or who read the French medieval troubadour romances are going to find very very common references, very common you know, very common themes coming forth with Star Knight, because you can chart a course from the medieval romances of Arthur, that is to say, the Matter of Britain and the Matter of France, forward in time to Edgar Rice Burroughs with John Carter and the Mars books, and then from him to E.E. Smith, the Lensman books, and everything else he did, in creating space opera, and then from there through George Lucas, you can get to Star Knight. And that's the western half of our inspirations and literary predecessors. Then we go to the east when we want to start talking about the mechanicals and the aesthetics. Some of the aesthetics.
What about the aesthetics?
Well, it's one thing to have knights running around with laser swords, and you don't have to go that far to find giant space fleets running around having massive fleet battles. You end up looking east as soon as the giant robots show up. Yes, they're powered armor and lensmen, and everybody talks about Heinlein with Starship Troopers, but you don't really get giant robots and so forth until you start looking east at all of the super robot and real robot shows starting in the 60s and going forward to the present, when, in that way that the Japanese are known to do, they take an idea and they iterate and iterate and iterate until it becomes a trope of its own and becomes an institution of its own. And the two excerpts I have up on the writing blog really do show that influence. If you are familiar with the core of the mecha anime institutions in Japan, if you're familiar with Mobile Suit Gundam, if you're familiar with Super Dimension Macross, and on the super robot side, if you're familiar with Mazinger Z, if you're familiar with Getter Robo, and a few other well-known super robot shows, or their Western equivalents like Voltron and Robotech. If you are familiar with those, you will see things that you recognize in Star Knight.
You see, I've got one of the Macross-looking ones up right here, with claws and everything.
Yeah, that's the Hobgoblin, one of the space pirate mechs. My illustrator, who I wish I could name, but I'm going to follow Brian Niemeyer's lead, since we both work with the same guy, and call him Art Anon. Art Anon has been very surprising. I've been giving him my descriptions for various things, and he brings back the concept art, and I'm just constantly amazed at what I've been getting. It's been better than I've been expecting every step of the way. So, now what you see on the screen here is the improved version of an original space pirate mecha design called the Goblin, and the Goblin is meant to be that grunt mech that the hero sees coming at him in large numbers and tends to swat away pretty easily. And thematically speaking, he's meant to be the grunt. This is the guy who's a little better than the grunt, in that he has a multi-form mecha that he is able to exploit for certain ends.
mostly violence and banditry and
Mm-hmm. Oh
piracy
yeah.
and all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, the big difference between the two is that the goblin has no alternate form, and the hobgoblin does.
Not bad.
Mm-hmm. And as the series goes, my plan for Star Knight in terms of all the various mecha tropes is that every major form of mecha is going to show up, and there's so this is the first one that technically can be considered a transformable model. There will be combiners, there will be transformables that combine, there will be all sorts of stuff that goes on because this is a large galaxy with a mature civilization, and therefore there are differing levels of technological sophistication from place to place.
And what will the heroes be driving around town with?
Ah, so the Star Knights of the Solar Guard, are the core 12 people that around which the entire organization is built. They have access to two kinds of robots. Each one has access to a super robot, which is very, very powerful and therefore requires authorization to deploy. Uh, they also have access to a real robot, something more like what you see in a Gundam show. And they are able to use that at their discretion, period. The big difference and the technological edge that the Guard has over everyone else is that their real robots do not require space in a hangar bay of any kind to travel around the galaxy. They have the ability to do what you see in Tron Legacy. They carry a baton, and they use the baton to bring forth their real robot.
Ooh.
And this is not magic. This is straight up energy to matter transfer, and it requires energy to accomplish. It's a set process every time, and anybody theoretically could pick up the baton and use it. There are security protocols in place, but that's a different matter. And you see this in the second of the two excerpts that I have up on my writing blog, the one that's called Come Durandal. Now, following Real Robot convention, many of the real robots have variations on their themes, and these reflect the pilots who sit in the cockpits. The terms that are usually thrown about are limited production, prototype, test bed, ace custom, that
Ooh.
kind of thing. And for the members of the Solar Guard, all of their real robots are technically limited production ace custom models.
I do like those.
Yeah. So they tend to be tuned for their user. They tend to be high quality designs with greater than average capabilities, and therefore greater than average materials involved. Their counterparts elsewhere, and they show up in the story amongst the bad guys, they tend to, while they don't have the ability to summon their giant robots, they have other notable abilities. One of the villains, Dashing Jack, he has the ability to use a device that allows him to remotely control his mech. Our hero can't do that. And that becomes a plot driving element at the end of the first act, when our hero thinks he's got the bad guys cornered, only to see the enemy's mech coming, and he then has to choose what to do. And either way is technically a loss for the hero.
Right? Because if he battles with this remote controlled mech, nothing, the guy just loses a mech that he's not in and has no help, but he could also die in battle. And if he ignores the mech, the guy could destroy his whatever he's protecting in time before he destroys the remote control.
Correct. And that reflects another thing that I am upfront about in my writing. I do not like stupid villains. I do not like stupid heroes. I do not like stupid villains. And I try to make my conflicts in my stories, as much as possible, battles of wits as much as battles of might.
I
So,
do like that.
So it is very much a matter of, do the villains have enough of an understanding of their opposition to be able to plan around the hero's known traits, and does the hero have the ability to figure out what's going on fast enough to counter that? And that little back and forth, I think, it really does add to the tension and makes the story more enjoyable for the reader, because it respects the reader's intelligence as much as it does the character's intelligence.
And it is very important to respect the reader's intelligence in these stories.
Mm-hmm.
It's so insulting when it's like, I'm reading some new science fiction novel by somebody who isn't like John C. Wright or Brian D. Meyer, or that is like, it's hyperdrive, and then they pretend that they have an explanation for it, and that it's hard science fiction, and it's like, no, I know you're just pretending. Please treat me with some modicum of respect. The laser sword doesn't need an explanation.
Mm-hmm. And I don't go to the effort of explaining how everything works, and I very much avoid didactic uses of my characters. Where it is absolutely necessary for me to explain something to the reader, I do have a setup in mind. My audience surrogate character is actually my hero's page, a 10-year-old boy named Cretan. And the few times I find it necessary that something has to be explained, it will be in the manner of Cretan, who, being a 10-year-old boy, is inexperienced and still learning how things work. Will ask the question, and then somebody around him will explain it. And so far, I've had to do that only once, and I may be able to eliminate that after my editor gets a look at the manuscript.
Yeah, I could see that. I can see how that could work.
Mm-hmm.
That's not too bad, because I've watched quite a bit of anime. I've watched some card game anime and stuff like that. You always have some people. It's like, he's using this card this way to gain such and such an ability. And while that works out, like, there's a funny gag where they wish, where some like dumber characters wish the smart character who always explained things was running around somewhere, but he wasn't. Was there to explain things to them, but it's always like inferior to what the players themselves can use with the cards given to them because of their imagination.
Yeah, the other things I know are going to strike the reader as being notable, if not true, if not absolutely, extraordinary, are the cultural assumptions that go on. You tune into Star Trek, and it doesn't take too long before you start noticing what the assumptions of the Federation and Starfleet are. It's the same thing with Star Wars. You start noticing what their assumptions are in the culture of the Star Wars galaxy. Here in Star Knight, it's should be pretty apparent from the first page what some of the assumptions are going in. One, there is a culture, there is a hierarchy in the culture, and it's pretty apparent simply by having one character address another character with an honorific of some sort. On the first page, I have my hero who is a knight. He travels the galaxy with his sergeant at arms, and his page. And the reason he has two people with him instead of just one is because the page isn't old enough to bear arms by himself as a squire. Not yet. So.
Not yet, you say?
No. Cretan is intended to, as the audience surrogate character, he is intended to change and grow over the course of the series, reflected by the fact that, he ages and grows up and comes of age over the course of from book to book. So by about book 3 or 4, he should be a squire. And by the end of the series, he should be a knight in his own right. And so over the course of the series, you're going to see him. You're going to see him, become formally recognized as a squire, and that's when his father, who is doing the combat assistance stuff that a squire is supposed to do for his knight, steps out of the story at that point and becomes more of a minor character. And Cretan therefore increases his profile accordingly. Cretan has older brothers who are also knights, and they will show up here and there in various capacities. And I tend to use my minor characters to do efficient world building. So there are knights in the setting. What do they do? Are all of them like my hero? The answer, in short, is no. They're not all like him, but they're all important military characters, because to be a knight is to be part of what in real world terms would be our officer class, and that's reflected by some of the characters referring to themselves in a long form format, and by that I mean I am, I am Duke Farr, Lord Admiral of the Third Fleet, blah blah blah, and sometimes some of the characters will be addressed in a manner that is more like the way warriors in ancient myth would announce themselves, and so I am Sir so and so, conqueror of X, slayer of Y, blah blah blah, and as a means of intimidation.
Classic.
Yeah.
No one ever feared a man named Bubbles without incredible effort on Bubbles' part.
Exactly. And that's a very different take on what will technically be military science fiction when this book does go up on Amazon. But so these are military men conducting military deeds, but they do so in a way that is not the way it is commonly portrayed, because the common portrayal of science fiction assumes a modernist point of view or a postmodernist one. And I, being part of the pulp revolution, have a habit of, as we say, regressing harder, because I want to go back to the roots of the pulps, and the roots of the pulps have their roots in classic literature. So I'm looking back to Homer, I'm looking back to Virgil, I'm looking back to to Beowulf and the Norse sagas and so forth. And as I can, I will be doing the same to the classics of Eastern literature. Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Journey to the West, all of that stuff. And I'm trying my very best to bring what is old back to the present, because it's been lost, deliberately so, over the last 50 years.
Have you read My Sheik of Mars?
I have not read it yet.
Because I did that exactly, except with the Arabesque style that was popular in Victorian England. I mean, this is we've got the Pulp Rev guys, we got what we're doing, we got what other people are doing all over the place. We're just reviving things left and right. They should call us the Reanimators, not the Superversives or Pulp Rev.
And on that note, I will note, I do not do nihilistic despair. I may make my characters suffer, I may make them suffer badly, but I don't leave the reader with thinking that it's all hopeless and therefore pointless, and they should just submit to the grind, to the grind of of this nasty, horrible culture we currently have. No, ultimately the good guys do win eventually. It's just not going to be apparent. And there are, the villain, therefore, my master villain for this series is therefore somebody who is very good at playing the long game. And, he does actually show up, in book 1. He not only shows up, he plays a very important part, because the villain's plan goes awry at one point, and he has to step in and intervene to keep it on track. And it's
I like
that,
it.
yeah, it's that little thing that ends up becoming his undoing, because what he has to do, while the hero doesn't see him do it, the heroine does. And having to find a way to cover this up, because the villain's aware that the heroine knows, ends up driving him for the rest of the series, and eventually does lead to his undoing.
I love it. Now, you're not going to make it arbitrary, are you?
No, it's not going to be an arbitrary thing. Uh, when it comes, you will be able to look back and see how it led to his downfall. There will be a logical chain of events.
I like it, because the logical chain of events is always incredibly important to me. I never like it when things are done out of sequence or because it's fairly arbitrary. Like are you caught up with Galaxy's Edge?
No, I'm not. I've already fallen into a very common writer's trap in that I get, bogged into my own stuff and I fall behind in my reading.
You see, my job gives me time to read, so I still keep up with it. But like even Galaxy's Edge occasionally comes into the trap of arbitrariness, where the hero stumbles onto the plot, and the plot unfolds before him, and then the villain isn't smart enough to either let things play out or uh, kill the hero when he has the chance, or allow the hero to be killed. Like it's just one of those things where if you read it, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I
Uh,
I have a pretty good idea of what sort of arbitrariness is going on.
hmm. And it's like you do need a certain amount of arbitrariness. Otherwise, why is your hero particularly chosen to defeat the Hellmouth or whatever? Or like in one of the books that's coming out from 8 Years of Elfland, it's their father. So instead of making it just an arbitrary fairy kidnapping, I make sure that he has a history with the Fairy King, and that it's ultimately for the Fairy King's entertainment. But there's rhyme and reason behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing defeats a well thought out plot by an arbitrary mistake.
Yeah, that's something I've learned to try to detect by you know by thinking in terms of how things sound, so to speak. That's the best
Mm-hmm.
metaphor I have. You know, Meaning I go back, I'm reading aloud, and if something doesn't come off the tongue right, that and then I go back and change it. And that works as well for prose as it does for ideas. If the
Mm-hmm.
ideas don't sound right, if they clunk, if they thud, if they don't operate smoothly, it'll come out in the prose, and that means that I have to go back and fix it.
Yep. I'm going
Mhm.
to be doing that with one of my projects currently. So you said you have like a 9 book plan? Hold on.
9.
9. There we go. I was right the first time. A 9 book plan for it. So what kind of power escalation are you planning on doing?
The power escalation that I'm planning is mostly on the side of the villains,
Mm.
because uh, the master villain's plan, the master villain's plan requires a careful manipulation of events, and as well as concealing his participation in creating these events. The events are uh, leading the events are leading the galaxy, which is actually mostly stable at this point, into a massive galaxy war, galactic
Oh,
war. And during this part, and the reason for the war is because he secretly serves the enemy of mankind. Go figure.
right.
And he is trying to do something that had been attempted 1,000 years previously, but didn't. But it was thwarted at the last moment. And in order to make this event happen, he has to conduct a massive human sacrifice, which is what the war is supposed to be for. and he needs the power of of a massive human sacrifice as big as he can muster in order to bodily bring the enemy into the into this world.
Mm-hmm.
That is
And clones won't do.
no, clones will not do. Clones will not do, and of course there won't. You can't just get away with throwing robots at it either.
Right.
So he is attempting to massively depopulate the galaxy, and in order to bring the enemy in, and then
Mm-hmm.
he will rule this world, this domain as the enemy's viceroy.
Sure.
Of course.
That's what he tells all the sexy up and coming emperors.
Mm-hmm. And he and and the enemy the enemy, of course, his goal is to defy God, and to defy God, and basically says, see what I told you, you're wrong, you know you know you have to admit I'm right now about this creation of yours. And that may you know part of that it ends up part of that ends up happening. And it's how the heroes who survive this recover and regroup, that ends up becoming the beginning of the end for our villain.
Somebody says cosmic fedora in the chat.
Let's put it this way: the more I think upon the enemy of mankind, the more I'm inclined to see him as Vox Day would put it, as a gamma male writ large. I really do. I yeah yeah. There are times when I just want to say, "Shut up, Wesley." And
well, that's what he says. Get behind me, Satan. Shut up, Wesley.
Pretty
Is
much.
Wesley Satan? He might be.
And in terms of religion, that's probably as didactic as I get. Because I'm here to entertain, not to preach. And otherwise, the elements of Christianity that are present in the setting are, again, part of that presumed culture thing. People go to prayers, and they say people go to prayer, say their prayers. They go to mass. They ask saints for intercession, things like that. And because it's 1,000 years in the future, there has been a cataclysm along the way. There are certain distortions between the real world and the future, this feudal future that has taken place. Along, some of which I play for comedic effect. There's a in the first act, there's our heroine, who is known for her beauty, and not just her beauty in terms of how she looks, but also she's a musician, and she and a few of her noble allies and companions are doing a command performance. And the way I set it up is, she says, "And now I present to you a song of old earth," which is the term that's used for all the history of mankind before the cataclysm. A song of old earth, a song of a great princess of Mars. And this is what I like to do with my references. I like to be efficient. So if I throw in a reference to classic literature, I'm doing it for a couple of reasons. One, I like to do my little references and call outs, to keep the reader entertained on one level. And second, by choosing to use this story from the heroine's perspective, she's attempting to seduce the hero, because my romance is very much one where a woman who has recently come of age sees the man that she idealizes as a husband, and tries to entice him into courting her. And he, being a veteran fighting man who has several, quite a bit more years of life experience on him, sees this transparent attempt to come on to him and is like, girl, please. It's like you say you wish to love me. You can't even show me you can cook. What is this?
Right.
So that the face of the courtship at this point is her trying to prove to him that she is a woman, not a girl, and that happens by the end of this book. And the way that happens is that she is given a character defining moment in her character arc where she has to express her maternal instincts in order to protect Cretan, who along with her has been taken captive.
Out of curiosity, well, first we have a good comment from Wolfman at Large. High-powered gamma males make great villains. They have all the skills and resources to pull off the great plan, but at the same time have the seeds of their own downfall to plant at the same time. And I agree with that.
Mm.
It's interesting. Back to my question. Why did you choose? How do you spell Cretan?
Oh, Cretan. Creton. It's actually a number of my characters are actually references to real places and locations where I live in the Minneapolis area.
Okay.
So, in fact, Cretan, his father Sibley, his mother Henrietta, and the first of the older brothers, Durham, are all references to places and people that are historically significant around here. In fact, my hero's actual birth name is also after two very important people in Minnesota history.
Mm-hmm. I have no idea about the history of Minnesota.
Yeah. It's one of those things I threw in. I decided to do because I am justifiably proud of where I live, and it's a little bonus for those who lived here and are familiar with what I'm referring to. It's a habit I picked up from one of my friends, Scott Lynch, who's done a lot of the same sort of thing with his Gentleman Bastard sequence.
I always have fun with names. I like you can put in so many different layers with it. You see, when I read Cretan, I didn't hear how it was spelled. So, like, I was thinking of Cretans, and then I was thinking of that one verse in the Bible where it's like all Cretans are lazy, gluttonous, and drunkards. Therefore, reprove them sharply. So that they may not be that way. And it's like, you're naming somebody after a negative stereotype. That's interesting. I don't know. But no, it's something completely different. Never mind. But you like names, though. So what's the name of the main character, then?
I usually refer to him by his title of Lord Roland. If I were to give his full heroic name at this time, it would be Sir Ramsay Hennepin, Knight of the Vatican Solar Guard, Lord of the Seat of Roland. And the way that last part works is that there's the members who are called up to the core organization of the Solar Guard. They're referred to as the Companions. And much like like we see with Arthurian myth, they meet around a circular table in a place on the Palatine Hill in Rome.
Is it Earth Rome?
Yeah, it's Earth. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Once more, the core of mankind's civilization is Rome. So, because that's where the church is still headed.
Right.
And on the Palatine Hill is where the Solar Guard has its headquarters. And there's a room in there for the companions of the Solar Guard, and there are technically 13 slots around the table. One of them is reserved for the Pope, so when the Pope decides to attend, he can. And the other 12 are referred to as seats, and they work like the Siege Perilous does in Arthurian myth. So when you are elevated into the companions, there's one or more seats that are available, and you are then consecrated to a seat, and that involves a lengthy ceremony of prayer and vigil and all of that stuff. At which point, you are then issued your baton for your real robot, and you go through the attunement process to the super robot that is tied to your seat. This chamber has 12 statues that ring the room, and these statues are the technological link between the seat and the super robot, and where the super robot is stored when it's not in use.
So, so you profess a lot about Arthurian myth, but I've noticed that quite a few of the references have been to Charlemagne's paladins.
Yeah, that's because the original title of this series was "The Matter of the Milky Way," and it was meant to be a kind
That's
of
cool.
meant to be evocative of the matters of Britain, France, and Rome. And
right. So, out of curiosity, why'd you change it? That was pretty cool.
The long and the truth is that after my free starter experience, Brian Niemeyer emails me and says, "You have an opportunity to fix a lot of your errors, and one of them is the title. The title was, he thought the title was too literary for the audience I was aiming for, and he turns out to be right. So
you're right,
and." Not that
pink.
I don't like to waste what I create. So what I did is the original title was series title is Matter of the Milky Way, and the book title was The Taking of Gabriella Robin. And so I took the original book title, and that is now a chapter title, and the original series title is now been recycled into my future history, in that people start referring to the events of this series as the Matter of the Milky Way.
I like how you're bringing it full circle.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've pretty much sold me on this, on all the ideas and stuff like that you're putting it in on. I do like it quite a bit. But so I do have another question about your world. So why the Pope and not future Charlemagne?
That is my decision to specifically avoid a very common science fiction trope, which is the Galactic Empire trope. And what I wanted to do was present a future where mankind had settled in throughout the galaxy and created a mature civilization, but there wasn't a single dominant polity, no single state that had overwhelming dominance over mankind. In other words, I didn't want a future Roman Empire. I wanted a future Christendom.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So there are kingdoms. In fact, there are no republics in Galactic Christendom. There are no republics. There are no democracies. There are kingdoms, and that's pretty much it. So, and that's a consequence of the cataclysm and what happened afterwards. And I don't really get into it in this book.
That's fine.
Because in narrative and literary terms, they are, telling the tales of the cataclysm and the aftermath of the cataclysm is a completely different genre. In fact, there are several genre shifts as that goes on, and therefore they are technically of different literary categories that do not share an audience. So if I wanted to stay within my property, but I wanted to court a different audience, I would start telling the backstory. That's what I would do.
I do like that.
Mm-hmm.
And my main problem is the audience seeking, I have found. They're fickle, and the things I want to read aren't necessarily popular, which is a great pity for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but this is something I definitely want to read. I do like Galaxy's Edge. You know, Nick Cole and Jason Ansbach have done uh, absolutely top tier work, and they're, you know, soft cover, hard covers, whatever you want to say, you know, are on my list of buys once I start seeing the sales pop in for Christmas. And we say Christmas here. Uh,
Mhm. Yeah, it's going to be, I know I can deliver the ebook, which is what I've promised by Christmas, New Year's. Um, I talked with Brian Niemeyer yesterday after recording for Jim Fear. You know, barring any screw ups on the part of Kickstarter, Indiegogo getting the funds to my checking account when this concludes. Um, I should be able to deliver the book when I say I will. And if something goes wrong, God forbid, knock on wood, all that stuff. Um, backers should get what my backers should get their choice of of electronic book format by the date I said I would. I have said up front, print will be coming as soon as possible. And a lot of that is because I am going to be setting up the print version to go print on demand through Amazon, and that means I have to go figure out, all of that stuff, which is, you know, do I have to buy my own copies at cost and then ship them to me and then out to the backers, or can I send them directly to the backers? How much is that going to cost versus how much I have in the in my bank
yeah.
account, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I know that for my book, anyway, it's like $12.99 to purchase it straight from Amazon, and I know that there are ways to buy it wholesale, though I'm not too sure on the details because it's printing from Amazon. Like,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's a steal from Amazon's perspective, but yeah, there's options for you to do that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Though you know, the reason why I got a publisher is because I didn't want to have to, you know, work on that stuff myself uh, too much. Partially because I will also fear failure. But beyond that, no, this sounds like a great time. So how do you? So like, all right, here's something I'm thinking of. So like, is like the final boss going to be like the main villain piloting a Satan mecha? Be honest with me.
Um, what's going to happen at the end is, as much as having him just show up in Super Satan Robot, S, and
Yes, yes.
having him throw down like that would be satisfying. I like I like the way Gurren Lagann's final battle with the anti-spiral went better, in that
Mm.
you start at with most super robots, and you every step of the conflict that escalates actually scales down until you're man to man. And that, I think, is far more satisfying because, you know, it strips away every excuse that the villain would have for losing, and it gives the reader the the satisfaction of knowing that the hero, more as close to barehanded as can be had,
Hmm.
still has what it takes to beat the bad guy when push comes to shove. And
I like it.
mm-hmm.
And I could
So
see how you could do it. You could have the villain in his super robot. You come out with the super robot, and then you just scale it down with each step until
mm-hmm.
finally they're bare chested fighting on top of a black hole or something. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like. Did you ever play the Metal Gear Solid games?
I haven't played them. In fact, I never had a video game console growing up. Uh,
I
I've
played
only,
them in my adulthood, but
yeah. Well, so yeah, I've
there's a
I it's not that I'm unfamiliar. I hang out with the Metro City boys. I've been, Oliver Campbell's been doing that for, has done Metal Gear playthroughs, you know, from time to time. So I've watched, but I haven't played. Yeah.
there's this great scene I was thinking about was something similar to what you're talking about, where Liquid Snake and Solid Snake have a fist fight on top of the head of the destroyed Metal Gear Rex, while Shadow Moses burns around them. Which has always been like one of those great climactic scenes in video game history. And I was thinking of that as we were talking about this. Yeah.
Now, the thing that I'm, the thing I want to point out at this moment is that, and I did when we were doing Jim Fear's show yesterday, is that Brian, myself, and Roland Yancey, all three of us who are currently doing mecha-oriented projects, we're working in prose, but we are dealing with subject matter that is very friendly to visual heavy media such as comics and anime.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started working on Star Knight, one of my explicit goals was to get this adapted to different media as soon as it was practical. Comics are going to be far easier to do than anime, and at this point, I heartily encourage any of you listening to this, if you can get a hold of Ethan Van Sciver or Richard Meyer, Diversity Comics, or anybody else, and get them to look at in my direction and say I'm open to a comic book adaptation, go ahead, put in a good word for me. I am more than happy to not only talk about adapting this particular project, but to talk more generally with those people about novelists and comic book people coming together to produce more comic adaptations of novels and more novel adaptations of comics. Things that have happened within the decaying big publisher fields, but really should be more by people who are small press and independent, because that allows our intellectual properties to reach new audiences. And not everybody who reads wants to do comics, and vice versa.
I'll admit I'm kind of in that section. Comics was never a medium I appreciate, and even as I grow older, I rarely read the amount of manga I used to, and have focused on my few favorites. If you ever get the time and you do read my Sheik of Mars, because I think we're a kindred spirit in what we're trying to accomplish, though I'm more in the fairy tale and sort of planetary romance sort of thing, like the Nightlands, more than straight up like Star Wars and that sort of thing. Though we both have similar roots in King Arthur. Is JoJo's, if you read, Sheik of Mars, have you ever read JoJo's Bizarre Adventure?
I haven't read it. I've been watching the anime though.
So if you imagine Sheik of Mars as JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, like everyone's posing all the time, everyone's super dramatic about things.
Mm-hmm.
It is, if I had like three wishes, my wishes are Hirohiko Araki animates or does the illustrations for Sheik of Mars, and then David Productions animate Sheik of Mars, and then there's no third wish. I've already got everything I've ever wanted. That's how I view it. And you should always.
I'm on record with similar ambitions. I want to be the first Western author to get a property of theirs into Super Robot Wars, and I want to be in a position to make that happen in 2 years. I am rather open in my love and admiration for Yoko Kanno. In fact, my heroine is a direct reference to her. And if there is ever an anime adaptation, I want her to do this. I want her to handle all the music, because she is the living goddess of music as far as I'm concerned. And in terms of who I would want to do an anime adaptation, that I'm a little more flexible on, mainly because a lot of the folks I know and respect are getting to the point where they're wanting to retire. And I'd rather have them be happy in their retirement than to drag them out to do what from their perspective would be a glorified fanboy project. however professional that it will actually be. So I'm keeping an eye out for in the anime world as best I can, for the young talent coming up. That's why I posted on my main blog about this student group in Japan that are producing a science fiction adventure short film.
That's how what's his name? He did your name recently. He did a science fiction film by the name of Voices of a Distant Star.
Oh yeah, I've heard. I don't know the man, but I know the project. Yeah, the Voices of Voices of a Distant Star. That was something else.
It was.
Yep.
Kind of dumb, but it was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty good. Hit all the right points.
Yeah.
I've noticed this though, like people talking about how the old guard that we grew up with is retiring or passing away. A few before their time, like Satoshi Kon. But a lot of them in the natural course of things, like Miyazaki, we're probably going to see him retire or pass away in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Certainly retire.
Properly retire, not kind of sort of retire.
Right. Not just keep dragging him back in for one last job.
Like it's Godfather 3 or something.
Right. Like he himself has some opinions on it that I actually kind of liable to agree with. Negative opinions about anime. I'm not as big a buff as other people are because I tend to follow certain properties rather than people. But there's like Masaki Yuasa, who is my personal favorite creator, and then it's like, well, who else is there that I personally enjoy? Well, not kind of nobody. I like David Productions because they create, they bring to life my favorite manga, but if they didn't, like, I don't watch any of their other shows. I don't care that they redid Captain Tsubasa, which is apparently some seminal soccer show, and it's like with literature, bringing it back to like the West, I can say that there's very few authors I respect or desire to read who, are any sort of mainstream. I used to enjoy Kevin Anderson's Star Wars books, and he's like one of the greatest sellers of all time. But I don't really care about anything else that he did after Saga of the Seven Sons. I don't care about this. I don't care about that that's being brought up. The comics don't do anything for me. I really can't wait for it to expand out to become more mainstream so that, what's going to happen is we're going to become the old men. I only hope that we have, we give out better culture than we have received.
Yeah, I have to share that, that ambition. Leave things better than we found it. It's something I had ingrained into me when I was a Boy Scout. Oh yeah, and yes, my hero's personal starship. I have made this clear when I did the annotations for when I posted it. It is called the Baden-Powell. Yes, that is a reference to the man who created scouting, and that's also my little cue, that of what you can expect from my hero. He is in many respects very much a Boy Scout in his in his approach and his ethics. So,
and that's not a bad thing at all.
Not at all. Not at all. Baden-Powell created this, created the Scout Law, and the 14 points of the 14 points to be things that he wanted boys to internalize and emphasize as they grew up and went into their adult lives. And my own experience with scouting, while mixed on that regard, is I look back upon my time as a scout and I don't regret a single moment. They were some of the best moments of my youth. So, naturally, I do want to bring that forward somehow. And why not, put that kind of put the ideals of the Boy Scouts into a fictional hero that an audience can relate to.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It's I have an opportunity in my own books, Jasper, Silver, and Escape from Earth and a few other things. There's going to be a series about this child transformed into a nanotech swarm, or a teenager, really, and he still retains human form, but he acts like Grey Goo if he's like exhausted or any number of things. Like he has to learn to control himself, and over time, like he starts out, and I do it specifically, but I kind of hate myself for this, like with a blank slate, and he's going to meet more people, and I'll take various ideas and I'll try to mold him into something that can be looked up to. So that by the end of it, when I have like hero turns villain arcs, and I have, you know, this and that, where there's real cosmic evil like rolling in on a you know, haunted generation ship, that by the end of it, you know, he's the hero. And you know, he's not just doing it because he was forced, you know, he was forced to become a nanotech swarm. You know, he's not doing it because he's forced anymore. He's doing it because he genuinely loves the people within the solar system, and he'll fight for its sake, because life is sacred, which is of course the first lesson I base everything else on. Life is sacred, and it's based on what God created us and sees us as, which I think I've butchered horribly in the saying. But I do look forward to your Star Knight stuff. What I'll do is I'll give you, you know, a couple minutes if you want to say, you know, some final awesome heroic speech or whatever. And then if you want me to, I can read out your first excerpt from Readers of the Void, Attack Commences. And maybe Durandal, since they're both pretty short.
See, at this point, I do have the cover. You know, the cover has, you know, been discussed with Ardenon, and hopefully by this time next weekend, I will have the cover candidates. There will be 2. When I get them, I will post them, and I will then post a link from that to my Twitter account, where there will be a poll to decide which one to go with. It's a straight up A/B test, and whatever wins will be the final candidate, the final cover. The loser will be kept, and I will come back. I will present that alternate cover in a different manner later on.
I can't wait until we're big enough to do illustrations in our novels.
Amongst other things. What I want to do eventually is I want Star Knight to basically supersede Star Wars as a significant property, and you know, that means that yes, I am open to merchandising of all sorts, and I'm going to be starting with T-shirts as soon as I have the final cover. I want to slap that on a shirt and put that up for sale. And the reason I want to start dealing with merchandise is because if I have the more revenue streams I have available, the less I need to come back to Indiegogo hat in hand to beg for money to keep doing this.
Absolutely.
This is a business. I am technically in business now, so I don't have a problem with wanting to eat, and therefore I have no problem with making a profit.
See, I'm probably fat enough that I should probably think negatively on that, but
so I do want to have a high quality cover that encapsulates what you're going to get in one image, and when that comes up, you will be able to see it. And at that point, I really do hope that what Daddy Warpig noted happened for Richard Meyer's Iron Sights project happens to me, which is he was running with 3 days to go or so. He was running he was running at about $70,000 for Iron Sights on Indiegogo. He finally gets the cover, you know, and not just line art, which is what I will be having when I get it, but fully colored. He puts that up. he instantly doubles his take. And that illustrates what Nick Cole and Brian Niemeyer and everybody else who's been paying attention keeps saying, which is the cover is 80% of the buy decision. So
Absolutely.
I'm, what you folks who are listening need to take away is that I've met my funding goal, modest as it may be, without having a cover to share with you. When I have that cover, I will share it. And I sincerely hope that anybody who's been on the fence until this point, when they see that cover, they will have the confidence they need to, to step up and back, to step up and either back the project, assuming it's still open at that point, or after that, to buy it when it's available for sale at Amazon. And I will be continuing as best I can to get the best quality cover art I can, my finances allow.
I absolutely support you in this,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll throw in my own story for that. I believe the Sheik of Mars cover is absolutely excellent. The problem is that I had famous comic writer Brian Silverbacks do it, and it's this giant hulking technological genie over the small protagonist. It's very good, but the problem is people thought it was a comic, and so they didn't want to purchase it. Or they were put off from purchasing it because they thought it wouldn't be, what they expected. And so it's believed between the two of us, me and Jason Rennie, my publisher, that I have shot myself in the foot by making such an excellent cover that people mistook the genre, among other things. So
Yeah.
I absolutely know 100% what you are talking about. My next one is going to be Babes in the Woods surrounded by various magical monsters, and I got high hopes for it. It's a little bit on the cartoony side, but it encapsulates everything. Not cartoony, I should say, but it's a little bit bouncier than the story is, I think. Everything the story is, the magical, the forest, the creatures, and the threat to the children, in a way that customers will just love. Because I am in business too, but your good business does not hurt my good business, or mediocre business, or poor business, but it doesn't hurt my business at all. So every
No, it
time,
doesn't.
every
No,
time,
the pie is not finite anymore.
nope,
Because of the way the business is now. So, I lose absolutely nothing by being supportive of you and vice versa. And
absolutely.
rising tide lifts all boats, as the saying goes. Um, and the other important thing to remember about a cover is that the big reason it's the 80% of the buy decision is because it sets the expectations for what is in the book. And
Mm-hmm.
therefore, it's not only appropriate to have a very good cover, it's appropriate to have a genre appropriate cover.
Oh,
And,
absolutely.
one of the things I did before I started talking about, just privately discussing with Ardenon the cover, is I went to the Amazon Kindle store. I went to military science fiction and space opera categories where I plan to put this book, and I looked at the covers. And I think I mentioned this to you, privately beforehand, but there is a combination of cover elements that has not been done in either Western or Eastern science fiction to date, and I will be the first to do it. It is the combination of a space battleship, a giant robot, and a man with a laser sword.
Ah, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I remember
And
this guy.
furthermore, um, unlike a lot of the covers that even now, those of you listening, you can just pop open a tab, go to the Kindle store, and take a look for yourself. They the cover is going to look is going to be modeled on what a lot of my favorite television shows from Japan. So we're looking at you're going to be seeing a cover that has, that has you know, that has a ship near the top, that has character faces or even wholesale character models
Mm-hmm.
in the middle and around the bottom, and of partials of certain characters or mechanical designs here and there. And that is my attempt to clearly communicate in an image that this is not like the other books in this category. It is very different. And as such, I hope that the crowd that comes along sees that I'm very much going for the romantic side of you know of the military and space opera
Mm-hmm.
categories, instead of the very realistic side, which is what Galaxy's Edge is more oriented towards.
And we do need that romance.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's, to me, like, I know I'm griping after like, a feast table, because there's never been more space marine and space rogue fiction out there. But I would like a little bit of the more romance. And Galaxy's Edge does have that romance in there, hidden underneath the more realistic side of things, which I think is partially to its longevity and success past the first novel, certainly. Uh, but I think your focus will bring such a lovely breath of fresh air
Mm-hmm.
uh, to it. And I will tell you, you've certainly earned my $5. And if I enjoy the final product enough, I will purchase a physical copy. Uh, but not yet. See, I need to see it first, and once I do, though, I have high hopes for it, Bradford.
Yeah.
Any last
Um,
words?
I am grateful beyond measure for everyone who has backed the project to date, and I am, you know, even some of the naysayers who've been, who dunked on me when I appeared on Ethan Ralph's Kill stream. Uh, Even they were actually outnumbered by the people who were supportive and had a positive point of view. And I'm I'm looking forward to finishing this book, to getting it all done, and getting the electronic copy out to you people by Christmas, New Year's at the latest, and print
Mm-hmm.
as fast as I can afford to,
Mm-hmm.
and start building this thing up into into the replacement for Star Wars. So it's going to be a hell of a ride, and I know all of you are going to be thrilled as this builds from the little seed you've got now into a gigantic tree.
Oh yes, and there's so much space. Well, Bradford, thank you so much for being on the show, and I wish you every success. And I see that one of your stretch goals is an art book, which,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, that actually sounds pretty good. If you can get enough stuff for some decent fan art, ooh, that's going to be
Oh
a fun
yeah,
time.
yes. Feel free to go ahead and start making fan art. You don't need my permission. Go ahead, just do it. Just do it.
Yep.
Post it.
Well, my secret plan is, if ever I get popular and interest for Sheik and Mars picks up, I'll get the fan art and use it as illustrations, and like, get free illustrations. But it's like, oh, good job, you're so good, you've earned a free spot in my book. Now, here's a
Mm-hmm.
special edition with illustrations. You can't
Yeah.
see me, but I'm making hand wringing motions in a most vile fashion.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm
Yeah.
glad it's a success.
Yeah. If you guys put out make fan art, put it let me know, and anything that's really particularly good, I will actually call it out in my newsletter. Which reminds me, if you haven't already subscribed to my newsletter, um, travel to any one of my blogs. My main blog, the daily blog, is Walker's Retreat. The writing blog is Walker's Study. And in the contact tab, I have my contact email address, and a link to sign up to my newsletter. I will be using my newsletter more often now, so anybody who signs up will get advance notice of all sort of things that are going on, and when I get around to it, I will be giving away a short story or not or a novelette, depending on what the final version is, of the story that is technically the prequel to all of this, Crisis at Garmelsgate.
Oh, that's a good name. It's interesting. Crisis always adds a great thing to it. Well, thank you. And hope you have a wonderful rest of your campaign. Be sure to show off that cover whenever it comes up.
Will do. Absolutely. It's been a good time.
Absolutely. I'm going to read out some of the 2 samples you got, and I'm going to let you, whenever you feel like leaving, sort of thing. I've realized how to do an opening, but now I've forgotten how to do an ending. Well, this is excerpt. Oh, by the way, Indiegogo campaign. I do want to real quick also plug the Kickstarter for Kursova, just real briefly, because if we can get a full volume of Kursova, again, it's one of those things where everyone succeeds, and we all get good literature that lasts forever.
Yep.
Which is so fun.
And as soon as Kursova's open to taking submissions again, I've got 1 or 2 things I want to throw into the mix. See if
me too.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. I'm gonna read it out. You have a good rest of your day, Bradford.
All righty.
This is excerpt from Reavers of the Void. The attack commences. This is a work in progress. The final version may be significantly different from this draft excerpt. Let's see. This is taken from a chapter tentatively titled "Tonight Comes a Hurricane." Out of curiosity, while I still have you, do you do anything for your chapter headings?
My chapter headings are as much as possible my little references to anime music music. Opening theme songs, image songs. In fact, "Tonight Comes a Hurricane" is actually a reference to Bubblegum Crisis. The song in Japanese is Konniwa Hurricane, and it's the very first song you hear in episode 1 of Bubblegum Crisis. It's actually one of the best Japanese rock songs I've ever heard.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Zuzu the Painbringer strode across the hangar bay of the Great Gamora with the menace of a lioness on the hunt. She checked the seals of her battle armor, a matte black carapace with a white skull outline on the chest plate and red eyes in the socket. It hugged her muscled curves as well as it covered her bold blue skin. She looked down at the wing of men she was about to lead into battle, standing a full head taller than the tallest of them, and gave them wicked, lewd grins that bared her fangs. They cheered her as she passed. In the center of the bay knelt a new, man-like model, in colors and insignia mirroring her armor, and with a cockpit large enough for her inhuman frame. The cockpit, mounted in the torso, lay open, but Zuzu did not immediately mount it. Instead, she turned about to face her fellow Reavers. "Red Eyes Reavers, hear your mistress," she bellowed. "In a few moments, we launch from this ship and sortie in the greatest raid this galaxy has seen in over a century. We do what none dared think possible, a direct assault upon the heart of our enemy's territory, House Ireton's homeworld of New Edinburgh." The gathered men roared, their eyes, Edinburgh, their eyes showed rapt attention, and their mouths watered as if anticipating a kill. "They are soft and weak. believing we cannot reach them where they live, where they keep their treasures, where they plot to seize and conquer more of our land, our worlds, our lives from us in the name of their duke and their god. They are wrong, and today we show them with blood and fire that they are wrong. We shall crush them, drive them before us, and reap from them all of their treasure, and their God shall not avail them against us. The men exploded in roars, cheering Zuzu on. She basked in adulation as if showered by waterfalls. We bring the pain to them. The men that bring me the heads shall be rewarded with my love. The men now chanted Zuzu's name, brought to ecstatic frenzy. Mount up! We shall wade knee deep in their blood and seize the greatest treasures in all the galaxy this day. To war! To war! They answered, crying out in ecstasy. And they mounted their cockpits. As Zuzu did the same, all of their mechs in the bay began powering up. One by one, the red eyes in the head lit up as each one ran through pre-flight checks. Zuzu's unit closed the door to the cockpit and rose to stand. She watched as all systems came back green. Bridge, this is Painbringer. Ready, check. All clear, Vice Admiral. We're ready. Signal the first wave, Zuzu said. We're launching. Aye, ma'am, Bridge said, and the warning klaxon sounded. Reavers, prepare to launch, Zuzu said, and her men released from their niches on the bay's walls. Still in Gerwalk mode, the first flight on either side of the bay stood ready to go. The klaxons ceased, and the bay depressurized, and the doors opened to space. 4 per side hit their engines and flew out in formation into space. Within a minute, all 60 mecha departed the bay, leaving only Zuzu to go. Vice Admiral Zuzu, she said. Anakin, launching. Zuzu spun up the engines and took off out of the hangar bay on the port side, swiftly turning towards the bow of the Great Gamorra and accelerating to catch up with her men. On either side, she saw the mecha of the rest of the fleet's carriers had also launched their wings. Soon, a great mass of 6,000 mecha molded together in a massive formation, one with Zuzu's Anakin in the lead, and as the only one that was not a Gerwalk design among them. The Iriton heavy cruiser McCullough followed the routine patrol route, passing well inside the planetary sphere for orbital traffic and towards Dara's Folly. A flight of Gallo-class mecha flew alongside the cruiser as a combat space patrol, connecting as required to refuel and swap pilots. On the bridge, an alert sounded. Sir, we have... Oh, God. The crewman's eyes went wide. Main screen. The view screen switched to show a massive shower of asteroids, each the size of the McCullough, closing in on their position at high speed. Lieutenant, said the helmsman said. Orders? Evasive action. Wake up the captain, the young officer said, and contact headquarters. The cruiser turned on its axis to speed away on the vertical from the wave closing on them, going, in effect, over the storm. On the screen, a second window with one of the mecha pilots appeared. McCullough, those aren't errant asteroids. They've got rocket installed. Those are miss. Another pilot came in. They're armed. Those are ships. Then he, too, winked out. The other two soon followed. The officer of the watch, that young lieutenant, soon realized what he faced. Then the captain called to the bridge. What's going on, Lieutenant? Unknown hostiles using weaponized asteroids on attack vector, Captain. They've destroyed our mech escort, and we're in the line of fire. We're in weapons range. You're cleared to fire. I'm on my way, the captain said, and his window closed. You heard the captain. Fire at will. We've got to get clear. The McCullough guns fired at each target in range, destroying each in turn, keeping them away long enough to rise above the storm and get clear of a direct collision. The guns kept firing as the cruiser rose above the plain, while attempting to get back through to New Edinburgh when the captain arrived on the bridge. We can't get through to headquarters, the lieutenant said as he surrendered the chair to the captain. Captain, they're jamming us, the comms officer said. New contact support, the sensor officer said. Missiles, we're being targeted directly. Counter battery fire, the captain said. Helm, get us out of here. The McCullough's point defense guns shot down the missiles as they approached, buying time for the cruiser to turn about. But the Redolin's Revenge emerged from hyperspace directly above them at optimal range for its guns. A volley of fire from its bow-facing turret pierced the ship's shields and lanced its hull. One shot pierced its missile battery, exploding all of the ordnance at once, annihilating the Ayrton heavy cruiser with a massive fireball that consumed all hands. Revenge to Great Gamora, Gory said, his blue-skinned face smugly grinning from ear to ear as he stood next to the captain's chair. Obstacle cleared. Losses minimal. Surprise maintained. That's the first chapter we got. Now this one's shorter, but it's more action-filled. Again, this is a work in progress, but final version may be different. And it's in a little excerpt. The chapter title, we talked about this earlier, The Taking of Gabriella Robin, and is the climax of part 1 of the book. Let's see here. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I was just making sure there wasn't anything else important on there. Ramsey ran out of the grand hall, down a corridor, and out into a pathway that led up to a stairway up the curtain wall. He paused to see the Ayrton Gallowglass mecha struggling against the unknown mecha that launched from Dashing Jack's battleship, itself clearing the skies of Ayrton fighters and holding descending cruisers at bay with its guns and missiles. Sweeping across the spaceport below was a tall man-like model, moving with aplomb among the buildings on the surface. It looked like a statue in the image of an armored warrior of antiquity. Ramsey backed up a space, drew a baton from his boot sheath, then turned and ran for the wall's edge. He jumped over the edge, took the baton in both hands and bellowed, "Roland, draw your sword!" The batons separated in the middle, as if held together by magnetism. Ramsey held each half as if it were a joystick controller. From these halves, golden light appeared and drew into place about him a giant-sized armor frame. Then each core subsystem in turn drew into place, followed by cockpit interior, and finally the lights filled the frame drawing in. It became a solid man-like mecha, shaped as a living suit of full-plate armor, gleaming royal blue and trimmed in gold, bearing the crest of Roland on its chest and standing 12 meters tall. The cockpit within lit up, giving Ramsey a 360-degree view about him as the unit's legs kicked forward to fire the thrusters in its feet, while the thrusters on its back synced to fire with them. Ramsey landed with a resounding thud, but he landed on both feet and ready for action. "Behold," Ramsey yelled, "Durandal has arrived." The Gallowglass units within range of his voice, boosted by the speakers in Durandal's head, took heart at Ramsey's appearance. "We're saved," one pilot said. "The Solar Guard stands with us." Zuzu cracked a wicked grin in the cockpit of Anakin. "There you are," she said, and she turned her back to face Ramsey. "I can stop playing with these fools now." Ramsey looked on as he saw the Anakin level a long rifle at him. Readying the mech's movements as if he would a living man, Ramsey ran behind the empty mech hangar just as Zuzu fired upon him. He quickly shifted direction once he passed the hangar doors, ducking out of sight as the follow-up shots drew closer and closer to him. As he drew his battle rifle, Ramsey noticed the lack of ordnance meant to flush him out of the hangar. He lurched forward and rolled away from the corner he took, taking a hunch as to his enemy's intention. And when he saw the long rifle's barrel break through the wall, he got Durandal on its feet and returned fire. Then he aimed up and fired through the hangar roof where he heard something explode. Got one of the smaller ones, my lord, Gallo Glass Pilot said, but their leader's moving to flank you again. My thanks, Ramsey said, intuiting where Zuzu moved and firing another shot that way. Zuzu hustled around the hangar, trying to outthink her target, only to find him shooting from within the hangar at her as he brought the long rifle up to fire. As she reflexively threw the rifle in the way, blasting it in half. She discarded the ruined rifle, tossing it aside. In the few minutes she had before it exploded, and unintentionally destroying the spaceport's barracks. More rifle fire came from within the hangar, blowing holes in the wall and forcing Zuzu to dodge. She found a half-wrecked truck and dashed behind it as Ramsey blind fired at her, picking up the flaming wreckage, and then ran for the hangar. We bring the pain to you, Zuzu cried as she crashed through the wall. Ramsey shifted Durandal's feet, stepping out of the line of attack, and fired upon the wreckage. The shot blew a hole through what substance remained, making the rest fall apart in Anakin's hands. Ramsey fired again, but Zuzu dodged it and pulled a lance from the Anakin's back. The end ignited, and Ramsey jumped away through the roof to get clear as Zuzu went on the attack. As he descended, he put the rifle away. He thought Zuzu would immediately pursue with a charge. Zuzu did not disappoint. Ramsey drew his beam sword and met Zuzu's charge with a forceful parry. He spun to one side off the lance's line and tried to get inside Zuzu's reach, but she did not allow it. Reversing the spin to catch Ramsey with an open kick, she delivered and sent Ramsey spiraling through another building as he hurried to reclaim his balance. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught Zuzu launching Anakin in the air to attempt a death from above attack with her beam lance. He got Durandal's feet right and launched into the attack, coming just off her line, sweeping up with his beam sword. Zuzu tried to correct her descent, but didn't have enough time. All she could do was watch as Ramsey scored the Anakin's best breastplate with the tip of his sword and then cut her lance in half. But better that than lose an arm or get sliced lengthwise through her cockpit. Now having reversed the attack, Ramsey turned to descend upon Zuzu, only to find her already moving out of the way and igniting a beam sword of her own. Zuzu, stop playing with him, Gory said as he appeared in a window in her view screen. Move to back up Jack in the castle. At the same time, Ramsey saw Sibley pop up in a side window. My lord, Jack's here with us. We need your arm. Roland to Ireton Militia. Report. We're holding him here, my lord. The enemy's air support thins, and our ships are coming to our aid. Ramsey now fixed his eyes upon the Anakin. I see what your game is. Then Ramsey saw Zuzu break off and go to the castle. And that's the two excerpts we have so far. How do you like it? Being brought up, does this give you a hunger for audiobooks when they come out?
Well, I do plan on doing audiobooks.
They just have to make sure they do their voices. I'm not happy unless an audiobook does voices. Well, all right.
Yeah, I talked to Jim Fear about doing that as soon as the books are available for sale, and I think I'm able to afford hiring somebody to do it, because I know I'm not going to be able to do it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, thank you for coming on, Bradford, and you have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Yep. Been glad to be on.